Bellevue, Texas. For most of us, it's just a speed trap between Henrietta and Bowie. But for the 289 people inside the city limits, it's home. Today, the town held a Veterans Day program at Bellevue High School. But this year's program held more significance for this community because it honored a brave young man who walked the very halls of Bellevue High School before heading to the battlefield in Vietnam. James Edward Edgman graduated from Bellevue High School in 1969. His classmates, who knew him as Eddie, only spoke highly of him.
He was chapter FFA president. He inspired me to go through that as well. I went on even to become an ag teacher as a result. He was a great basketball player. Always high point. I was not.
Well before his time on the Clay County Commissioner's Court, Judge Mike Campbell was a Bellevue Eagle himself. He was a few years younger than Eddie, but in a small town, everybody knows everybody.
He was one of those that he was a friend to everybody. He was an encourager. He would build you up. He was a team player, and he made sure that each of us were team players too.
Eddie enlisted in the United States Army after he graduated, and in 1970, he was deployed to Vietnam.
Every night, we listen to the national news, and they always give the body count. And it didn't really mean that much to us until it's one of your neighbors, one of your friends. That's when it hits home.
On March 28, 1971, while Eddie was stationed at Fire Base Mary Ann in Vietnam, a surprise attack in the late night hours left the fire base destroyed, and Eddie Edgman, along with 19 other American soldiers, was killed in action. For so many in Bellevue and in nearby Vashti, Eddie's hometown, they could only feel heartbreak. Judge Campbell said Eddie's funeral was standing room only.
The processional from First Baptist Church in Bellevue to Vashti, to the cemetery where Eddie was buried. When the first cars arrived at Vashti, they were still leaving Bellevue Church.
Over 6 miles of cars, honoring a soldier who lost his life in service to this country. But for decades, all the community had to honor Eddie were his headstones.
There needed to be more here in Bellevue because this is where he grew up, this is where he lived, this is where his family still is.
Which is why today was so important. More than half a century after his death, he's finally being properly honored. Shadow boxes set to be hung in the Bellevue and Vashti community centers. His uniform to be hung and preserved in the 1890 jail museum in Henrietta. Judge Campbell said it was so important that Bellevue students today saw this happen.
The whole purpose of today's program was to instill in our students the importance, and several people said it, freedom's not free.
And it's a lesson that every single one of the nearly 50 veterans in attendance today who did make it home from war don't take lightly.
I thought it was so powerful for each of those children to go by and check their hands and understand that these are real people walk these halls.
The same halls walked by a small town hero, United States Army Specialist James Edward Edgman.